Hello, my name is Gus Prestera. I'm an organizational effectiveness consultant, educator, and coach. And oftentimes in my work, I have to communicate big ideas to people, and whether that's through one-on-one coaching or in small group workshops and exercises, conferences that I present at, articles that I write, self-paced e-learning that I develop. Whatever the format is, I'm always looking for an edge in terms of communicating my ideas more clearly, connecting with my audience, engaging with them, and making the information more memorable, more accessible, easier to remember, easier to use, especially when I'm not around. So one of the tools that we turn to quite a bit here is the infographic. And infographics do help us make information easier to understand and easier to remember, which is tremendously valuable in my type of work. So in this little video here, I want to share with you some examples of infographics and help you understand what an infographic is, but also what it could be and how it can help you drive learning. So let's take a look at some examples. But before we do, let's quickly define what is an infographic. Really, it can be any visual that conveys information or data. Oftentimes, it's a chart or a diagram, but it doesn't need to be, as you'll see. So, here's a couple of examples of charts that we've done, ring charts, and you can see how there's a combination of graphics and a little bit of text with some numbers, and it's helping to tell a story with minimal amounts of text on screen, and the visuals themselves are telling a lot of that story. So this type of ring chart comes from reports that we've recently done. Here's a few more charts. So we've got the pie charts there on the left. Over on the right-hand side, we've got this 360 assessment. So as part of the report that we provided people, we not only gave them numerical ratings for how well they're doing in each of these different competency areas, but they're also able to see a breakdown for each of the different respondent groups, so that they're able to make some further comparisons and draw some further insights from the data. Right? So the infographic in this case is helping to give the audience a little bit more ability to draw insights from the data. And then here in this employee satisfaction survey that we did, we can, for each item, not only give an individual manager their ratings in terms of how satisfied their employees are with them, but we can also enable them to compare their rating against the team average, so they can compare themselves against other managers on their team and see how well they do by comparison. And so again, that provides a level of insight that they're able to draw from that maybe otherwise would be very difficult for them to do, especially if they're just looking at reams and reams of data, right? But through an infographic, you can convey 1,000 words, maybe more, in a much more concise way. And then in this employee satisfaction survey that we did, you can see the little smiley faces and the sad faces, and you can see that the sad face numbers here are highlighted with red. And they make the important information here pop out, because a lot of the employee satisfaction scores were good, but where you really want to draw your attention to is to the ones where there are potentially issues, right, that we need to look into. Things that we might be able to do to help improve employee satisfaction are going to come out really in that unhappy, that sad face column. And so we want to highlight those. And so we can use formatting to highlight important information, draw the eye towards where we want the reader to really focus their attention. So infographics can help you do that. There's a lot more that you can learn about with regards to infographics as used for data visualization. Highly recommend Edward Tufte's work on data visualization. Take a look at that if you're interested in it. If you do a lot of survey work, a lot of reports, and analytics and stuff, you should be very familiar with Ed Tufte's work. But it's not just about charts and graphs and stuff. You can also use infographics to communicate other types of information. In this case, you've got a timeline and a process that we want to communicate. So this came from a mentoring circles program that we were trying to explain. So we're trying to explain to the audience what are the different things that happen throughout this program and at what different points in time. And so through a visual like this, you can see not only what's happening, when it's happening, what the sequence of events is happening, but you can also get a sense of relative distance in terms of how closely some things are happening and how far apart other things are happening, right? So you can get a visual sense of that from the infographic, and that conveys a little bit more maybe than what you could have conveyed if this was just prose and bulleted text. And then there are some other types of infographics that have nothing to do with teaching a process or helping people understand a process. In this case, we were trying to help people understand the success factors for a mentoring circle. And so we've got we're trying to think of success factors and how we could best communicate that. And we thought of, well, we're aiming to build a solid foundation for mentoring, a solid support system. What visuals kind of come to mind, what metaphors come to mind, and so we thought of a building, a structure, and then we thought of a Parthenon type of structure, and with pillars and so forth. And so that inspired this very simple infographic, which is really just a combination of rectangles and trapezoids and triangles, really coming together to form a shape. Hopefully a shape that is more memorable than it would have been if this had just been a bunch of bulleted text. Then you can also use, I like to animate my infographics, and in this case here, we've taken 10 best practices and we've summarized them in these 10 little tiles, and then we can, make it so that PowerPoint is highlighting individual ones as the speaker is talking about them. So if I want to talk about the hard look in the mirror, I can keep my audience's attention focused on that particular tile and hopefully not pay as much attention to the other tiles. And then when I'm ready to proceed, I can click next and then go to the next best practice that I want to talk about. And so it helps the instructor, I think, control the audience's attention a little bit if you are animating your infographics and animating them in a way that highlights what you want to talk about. So in this other example, this came from another webinar that I did. And here again, this is not that different from just a couple of columns of bulleted text, but we use some additional graphics here to make the comparison a bit more poppy, right, and more impactful. And hopefully those arrows that are in the middle help to summarize what the comparison is here. And so we've taken a couple of bulleted lists and just enhanced them a bit by turning them into a quasi-infographic. And in this infographic, we're trying to communicate or trying to teach a process flow for how to have a mentoring session, a mentoring conversation. And here again, we've got the circular infographic in the middle, and now we've got examples that are popping up that the instructor can control and speak to those, and then move on to the next one. Each example can have can just be some additional text, or in this case, it was some actual dialogue. And this is an infographic that was created in PowerPoint, as were all the other ones prior to this. But this is an example of that same infographic created by a graphic designer. So we wanted to upgrade it a little bit, and so we took it to a professional graphic designer on my team who was able to do something a little bit nicer, more professional, more polished with it. But there isn't a significant difference between this and the PowerPoint version. Here's another example of one that was created by a graphic designer. We were brainstorming around what we might do with onboarding challenges, and the concept that we were trying to convey here was that there are that everybody kind of is taught certain things during onboarding that cover the basic things, right? But then there's a whole bunch of stuff that's underneath that we oftentimes don't get to, and those things can be pretty important to helping somebody onboard. So we batted it around. Eventually, we came up with this idea of an iceberg, where there's certain things that are above the water that are very easy to understand, and then there are other things that are below the water that take a lot more work and effort for people to learn. So we came up with that type of visual metaphor, and then we're able to create an animated infographic off of that. And this one here was created all in PowerPoint, and this one's trying to communicate a process. So in this case, it's the process for developing SMART goals. So we are using the shape of a path to communicate this idea of a process with steps along the way. And then you can see these examples popping up to provide a bit more context. So I like to have infographics that provide a bit of more contextual information that help people understand how they might apply the infographic and how they might apply that process or whatever the best practice or whatever it is that we're teaching them. And so I can do that by animating those in and out and not taking up a lot of screen real estate by putting it all on the screen at the same time. So animating infographics enables me to make better use of space and reduce the amount of cognitive load that we put on people by having them trying to process too much information at one time. So hopefully that gives you a sense of what an infographic is and what it could look like. Of course, they come in many shapes and sizes. Again, they don't need to be charts and diagrams, but they just need to be some sort of visual that convey information or data. And I would also add that the best infographics do it in a way that tells a story, that adds insight, that makes information easier for people to understand and easier for them to process, right, without overloading them. So, what are the benefits to that? So I think we talked about them, but let me just summarize some of those benefits, and I do that through the acronym SCORE. So first of all, it clarifies meaning, right? When you have a graphical representation of something and you speak to it, or you are narrating it in an e-learning course or something like that, having a visual there helps people clarify what you mean, because sometimes words can be interpreted differently. And then it also helps people organize memories. It gives them a visual image that they can grab onto and store in their memory, and that memory, that particular image can act as a map to help them organize all the other information. And that also, because you're talking about visuals here as opposed to reading text and audio narration and stuff, that's going through a different channel in the brain. It's being processed kind of in parallel with the text and with the audio. So it helps to take advantage of some of the additional capacity you have in the brain, which overall helps to reduce cognitive load. And so if you do that along with pacing and chunking information, you can really help the learner by not overwhelming them too much. And then because it is helping you minimize cognitive load and organize your memories in a way that's more effective, and the memories that you're organizing are more accurate in the first place because the meaning has been clear, all that adds up to strengthening retention, right? So it's easier for people to remember when all that is the case. And then lastly, I would say it engages the visual senses, which helps to arouse the audience's attention, which can help keep them, at least for a little while, engaged in what you're talking about. Of course, it's no substitute for bad content or content that's not relevant to the audience, but it can at least buy you a few seconds so that you can make your case for why that information is relevant and valuable. So that's how infographics, for me, score for learning. I hope you found this video helpful, and I'll talk to you again soon, hopefully. Take care.